Hey guys, I am so excited because we are finally going back out on tour, and this is going to be our biggest tour yet. We are hitting a lot of cities, coming to a city near you, and this tour is going to be unlike the last tour and unlike any episode or case that we have ever presented. It's going to be an all new exclusive case, an entirely new approach, interactive with you guys, and it is just going to be so great. I am so excited to connect with all of you guys. I am very eager for you to hear this case, and it's just going to be an unforgettable night. So tickets are on sale now, but grab yours now before they're gone. You can get all of the information at annieelise.com. I will also link it in the show notes, and I'm really excited to see you there. So head to annieelise.com, grab your tickets, and I'll be seeing you soon. There aren't many beautiful things I've seen, but I must say, you are one of them. That was the message that 18-year-old Kimberly Proctor received from a boy who claimed to care about her. Now, she probably thought that it was just harmless flirting. I mean, typical teenage stuff. But just a short while later, Kimberly was dead. And these days, almost everybody knows that the police can track what you do online, right? I mean, emails, text messages, social media. It's not as private as a lot of us once thought that it was. Most criminals are smart enough to cover their tracks, usually, but you also know how I feel about the ones who don't. I mean, we love to see these idiots. I mean, I love it when they give themselves away, posting selfies at the scene of the crime, or Googling how to get rid of a body, or, in today's case, confessing to a murder in a World of Warcraft chat room, like the online video game. That's right, this case doesn't just involve brutal violence. It also involves online confessions, sadistic fantasies, and two deeply, deeply, deeply disturbed teenagers whose darkest thoughts did not stay online. This is hands down one of the most graphic and heartbreaking stories that I have ever covered. So please, consider this your warning. Hey guys, I'm Annie Elise, this is 10 to Life, and buckle up, because today we are diving into the devastating case of Kimberly Proctor. Back in 2009, Langford, British Columbia was your pretty typical Canadian suburb. It was just outside of Victoria, which is the capital of the province, but it was far enough on the outskirts to feel small and feel safe. It was also home to 18-year-old Kimberly Proctor. Now, Kimberly had this long dark hair, chin-length bangs, which were trendy at the time, and whenever she posed for selfies, she always had this I don't know how you would describe it, almost soulful expression, like she maybe had some secrets that she wasn't ready to share yet, and a little bit mysterious. But the truth was, Kimberly didn't really have many secrets. She was basically an open book, the sort of person who would tell you whatever was on her mind, zero filter. She wasn't rude or mean or anything like that, but she was definitely one of those people who didn't really keep things to herself, if that makes sense. If she liked you and wanted to be your friend, she would just outright tell you. If she had a hobby that was maybe not very cool or very trendy, she didn't care. She would embrace it anyway. She just wanted to be able to be herself without needing to keep up or try and do what was popular or what would make more people like her. She was authentic. And she was also a huge, huge animal lover. Pretty much any animal that you can think of, she had as a pet at some point in her life. I'm talking hamsters, mice, lizards, rabbits, you name it. But her favorite animal, by far, were cats. Kimberly loved cats. And have you ever seen those little headbands that have the little cat ears that are attached to them? My daughter Emmy wears them literally every single day. You can even wear them as part of a Halloween costume, or my girl, she wears them every day to school. Well, Kimberly also wore these every single day at school during elementary school. So much so that she didn't just like cats, she wanted to be a cat, which I can't say that I've ever wanted to be an animal, okay? When I was younger, honestly, there weren't really any animals that I was obsessed with. I've never been an animal person. Most of the time, they kind of freak me out, with the exception of my dog Freckles. He kind of sometimes freaks me out too, actually. But I do remember that I did have a similar, childish dream or aspiration. I wanted to be a Spice Girl. I wanted to be Sporty Spice. I wanted the tattoo band on my arm. I wanted to be, I just fully wanted to be, she was sporty, right? Melanie C? Yeah, no, yeah. For some reason, I was like, wait, was that Scary Spice? No. I wanted to be Sporty Spice. I had their posters on my wall. I literally thought I would meet them one day and like become part of the group, which is so fucking cringe now that I say that out loud and think about it. But like, you know, when you're kids, you dream, right? I mean, I saw Spice World and I was like, I need to be on that bus. Never want to be a cat, but Kimberly wanted to be a cat. And regardless what your dream is, we all know how cruel kids can be. There are always going to be bullies looking for somebody who doesn't dress the same as everybody else or thinks that they'll be in a band that anybody else won't be in. I mean, somebody who doesn't act the same, you name it. Somebody who's obviously different. And the bullies look for these people so that they can pick on them, right? And in Kimberly's case, coming to school with cat ears on kind of got her labeled as an outsider. Kids picked on her, and every time she walked into the classroom, they would even make these like really taunting and cruel meowing noises at her, like meow, meow. It's just mean. Now, to be clear, this wasn't a one-off thing or something that they maybe did for a day or two after she wore cat ears to school. They kept up with this for literal years. Like, no matter what Kimberly did, she just could not outgrow this reputation as the weird cat girl. And her bullies couldn't just let Kimberly be who she was or embrace her own passions. They just felt like they had to tease her, embarrass her, and make her feel like complete shit just because she liked things that they didn't. And it got bad enough that Kimberly would panic every time that she would get to school in the morning. I mean, I'm talking full-on episodes where she felt like she couldn't breathe or couldn't think straight. She was that nervous and freaked out about the fact that she knew that she was about to get bullied when she walked on campus. So her doctors prescribed her medication to help her deal with this anxiety. However, the problem with that was these meds, they worked a little too well. They started dulling her senses to this point where she felt like she didn't even know what was going on around her. And according to Kimberly's mom, Lucy, the meds made her feel, quote, zombied out. She just wasn't herself anymore. She could barely be a person, which, of course, was not a good situation. So eventually, her parents stopped giving her this medicine, yet still, she was getting bullied at school and feeling awful about her social life and trying to figure out how she could cope with this anxiety. And to make matters worse, Kimberly was also diagnosed with ADHD. And I know that every person is different, every case is different, not everybody experiences ADHD the same way. But in general, most people with ADHD do have some trouble focusing and staying on task. And I don't know 100% for sure if that was the case with Kimberly, but it does seem like a safe assumption given how common that symptom is and what we learn about Kimberly next. Because all in all, school became very difficult for her. I mean, she was getting bullied, she was struggling in her classes. It was just a bad situation all around. So then Kimberly's parents decided to step in and support her as much as they could, as well as they could. That meant transferring her to a new school where these new teachers were going to be trained to deal with special needs students or students who needed a little bit more attention. Specifically, they sent her to an alternative school called Pacific Secondary. And like I said, Pacific Secondary, it was designed to help all sorts of students, or kids, I should say, who just needed a little extra help one way or another. That meant that they were set up to help students like Kimberly. They were going to help her with her ADHD, her social skills. They help other children with different learning disabilities too, just kind of, a broad spectrum there. They also tried to help support students who came from hard backgrounds or who just needed a little extra attention for one reason or another. Children with bad home lives, children who dealt with maybe violent parents or neglectful parents or parents who weren't even in the picture at all. And the people at Pacific Secondary didn't want anyone to fall through the cracks. So they tried to create a place where kids could just come and learn and be themselves. And sure enough, it was a great environment for Kimberly. She absolutely thrived there. She made a bunch of friends, she had a solid social circle, and it really felt like she was thriving for the first time in her life. She also dated her first ever boyfriend, Zach. He was another student at Pacific Secondary. And Kimberly had met Zach not long after she started attending there. They hit it off pretty quickly too, and before long, they were an official couple. While they were together, Kimberly also joined Zach's friend group. So again, she was now meeting people, getting along with people, making new friends, having an actual social life, which is so important when you're in high school, and especially if you're just looking to fit in. But a lot of the time, as we know, high school romances just aren't built to last. They fizzle out. And that was also the case for Kimberly and Zach. One day in late 2008 or early 2009, he just broke up with her. Now, they had only been together at that point for like a few months, but still, Kimberly was devastated. I mean, breakups are never easy, but they're even harder when your friends were your ex's friends first, because then it's almost like you can't keep that same social circle. And that was the case for Kimberly. I mean, her entire social circle was made up of guys that she had met through Zach. Now, growing up and looking back, I mean, to be fair, just because a relationship ends doesn't mean that you have to cut ties with everybody that your ex introduced you to. I mean, plenty of people can be mature about it, not take sides, have no drama. But this was also high school. This is how Kimberly saw it. She thought there didn't need to be drama or chosen sides, but the friends didn't necessarily all think that way, although there were a select few. So she did choose to stay friends with a couple of Zach's friends. But some of Kimberly's friends, especially her girlfriends, weren't convinced that she was sticking around because she just liked these guys' company and wanted to stay in the friend group. To them, it looked like she was trying to get Zach back, like she was finding an excuse to be near him, hoping that just maybe they would one day get back together. Now, of course, I don't know if that's what Kimberly was actually thinking, but if it wasn't her best move. But still, she was only 18. She was still learning, still navigating relationships, navigating heartbreak for the first time. I personally have done way more desperado shit than that in my past, if I'm just being real. Now, to the adults in her life, her parents, her teachers, it kind of just looked like typical high school drama. A breakup, some mixed signals, a little bit of, emotional fallout, nothing to really lose sleep over. But on March 18th, 2010, all of that was about to change. That Thursday started out like any other Thursday for Kimberly, which actually meant no school because, you see, she had arranged her schedule so that she had Thursdays off. So while most of her friends were out stuck in class, she had the whole day to herself, time to sleep in and relax. And honestly, she probably was feeling more relaxed than usual because she had just received some very good news. Between switching schools and struggling a bit in class, she had been worried if she was going to graduate on time. And the idea of summer school, or worse, a 5th year in high school, was something she really wanted to avoid. But just the day before, she found out that everything was back on track. As long as she kept up her grades that semester, she was set to graduate in the spring with the rest of her class. So this was a huge relief for not only Kimberly, but also her family. So that morning, Kimberly was sleeping in, and she was still in bed when her mom Lucy came in to say goodbye before heading off to work. She kissed her, said, "I love you," and walked out the door like she always did. And since Kimberly had the day off, she agreed to babysit for some local kids that afternoon. The plan was for her to be back home in the evening, where the family would then start planning her graduation celebration. So while Kimberly was supposed to be out babysitting, her mom Lucy called her, trying to check in, just wanted to ask how things were going, but the call went straight to voicemail. And that was not like Kimberly. It was a rule in their family, in fact, that if her mom called, Kimberly had to pick up no matter what. So when Lucy heard Kimberly's voicemail go, her stomach kind of dropped. It wasn't just that Kimberly didn't answer, it was almost how the call went straight to voicemail. No ringing, no delays. You know how it is. Like if you get a call and you redline it and it just goes directly to voicemail. So that only meant one thing. It didn't even ring once. So that meant Kimberly's phone was off. And that was something she never did. I mean, think about it. When's the last time you actually shut your phone off? I honestly couldn't even tell you. I don't even turn my phone off when I'm flying. I put it on airplane mode, don't worry. But the last time I shut my phone off was when I had to reset it. I don't think I've ever just turned it off. How weird. Am I a freak? I'm thinking about that now. My phone's on silent all day long. I never have the ringer on, but I couldn't even tell you when I turned it off last. So, sorry, I know I was digressing there for a minute, but this was enough for her mom, Lucy, to know that without a doubt in her mind, something was up. Something was wrong. To anyone else, it might have seemed like a small thing, but to Lucy, it was a red flag. She knew her daughter. She knew her habits, and this just wasn't right. So she called the police right away. And to their credit, they took her very seriously. I mean, just as seriously as she was taking it. And it wasn't long before they confirmed her worst fear. Kimberly had never even shown up to babysit that day. She also wasn't at home. Nobody had seen her all day. So then the investigators got to work, and they started with a tool that at the time felt very, very cutting edge. See, in 2010, Facebook was everything. It was where teens documented their lives in real time, who they were with, what they were doing, where they were going, what they were thinking. I mean, every photo, every status update, every tagged location, it was like a digital breadcrumb. I also remember, cringy, I'm going to date myself for a moment here, I am of the era of Facebook albums. And if you're a millennial or a Gen Xer like me, you know what I'm talking about, where you'd have your digital camera that was a literal brick. I remember mine was like a Kodak, but it was a digital, and I thought it was so cool. You'd go out for the night, you'd take all these pictures at the bars, at the club, whatever. You'd go home the next morning, you'd plug the cable into your computer, and you would upload all the photos into an album on Facebook where you would say like best night ever or like fun night. And like, it's just, I mean, it's funny. It's funny thinking back. And so I can definitely relate. I posted everything on Facebook. This was also, remember, 2010. So it was like the era where people were like, you know, posting my omelet, like breakfast. And then they would like put the crazy filters on it. You document everything. Sometimes even, sorry, I'm ranting a lot today, but sometimes even like now a Facebook memory will pop up on my Facebook where it'll tell me like 10 years ago you posted this, and I'm all, oh God, like the secondhand embarrassment kicks in to where it's like, I knew I only posted that passive aggressive status on my wall to like make sure my boyfriend at the time saw it, or my ex-boyfriend, to be like, oh, he knows I'm like having so much fun or like having the best night ever, even though I stayed home and did nothing, like whatever. So this is what people did. They constantly would update their page with check-ins, with photos, with all of the things. So right off the bat, the police in this investigation, the detectives were like, let's go look at the Facebook profile for every single kid that goes to school with Kimberly or that goes to her school at all. Let's see what they're uploading to Facebook. Let's see if they're uploading anything on YouTube. Let's read every comment. Let's basically just see what their online activity will show us. I mean, if anything. So while the investigators were scouring social media, Kimberly's friends and family came together, and volunteers as well, and they formed official search parties. And then they started combing through every inch of Langford, just desperate to find any sign of her. Yet every hour that passed without a lead, it just felt heavier than the last. But then came a break, because around 7 p.m. the next evening, just over 24 hours since Kimberly had been reported missing, somebody stumbled across something. However, this wasn't a search volunteer. It wasn't even somebody who was looking for Kimberly. In fact, it was a group of young guys, teenagers or young adults. I mean, I'm not exactly sure what their exact ages were, but they had gone out to a remote area known as the Galloping Goose Bridge. Their plan was to go out there, smoke a little weed, keep to themselves, just hang out, avoid getting hassled. But instead of a quiet place to get high, they walked into what was a true nightmare. Because there, right near the bridge, they saw something that just stopped them in their tracks. A body. Burned. Just brutally burned at that. It was so badly charred that it was impossible to tell who it was. At least at first. But then when the police arrived and compared dental records, the worst was confirmed. It was Kimberly. And even though her body was barely recognizable, one thing was immediately clear. I mean, this was not an accident. She had been murdered, obviously. Now, I want to just warn you, this next part is especially hard to hear, so just a forewarning here. But when the medical examiner did Kimberly's autopsy, even though her body was so badly burned, it actually wasn't hard for them to determine exactly how she died. It turns out that someone, or maybe even multiple people, had beaten her and tied her up. They even had shoved a sock inside her mouth, presumably to stop her from screaming. Then they covered the sock and covered her mouth with duct tape over it. They also taped together her legs and her arms. Then, once Kimberly was tied up and unable to fight back or scream or make noise, her attacker or attackers assaulted her in a sexual way. Not just once, but over and over again. Now, as if that wasn't bad enough, and this next part might actually make you throw up or physically gag. I know it certainly did me when I first discovered this, but as part of their assault, they also put objects into her genital area, into her front and back area. These objects included a 4-inch long lollipop stick and literal feces. Not her feces, somebody else's. Meaning somebody pooed and took that poo and shoved it inside of her. I mean, it's absolutely horrible. And truly, I have never, in all of the thousands of cases I have now covered at this point, I have never heard anything like it. It's not only next level cruelty, but just dehumanizing in nature, right? I mean, this attack was so degrading and vile and personal and twisted. I've never heard of that. I've never heard of somebody stuffing somebody else with feces. It's fucking grotesque. Now, while all of this was going on, Kimberly had, of course, been struggling to breathe. She had that sock in her mouth and the duct tape over it, which made it almost impossible for her to get enough air into her lungs. And to make matters even worse, as if it's even possible, her killer then put her inside a freezer while she was still alive. Almost like they were trying to store her body, but she wasn't just a body. She was still alive. She was a living, breathing person. Or I should say she was, until they shut her inside that freezer, because there was no air inside that freezer. So that, with the duct tape and the sock, ultimately, Kimberly suffocated to death. And unfortunately, the killer did not stop there. They continued to assault Kimberly in a sexual way even after she had died. Necrophilia. Having sex with a dead body is, again, a whole different level of twisted and sick. They even used a knife to then cut and slash her dead body, just like the most hateful, vile behavior that you can even imagine, just like desecrating this poor girl. And I know, it's a lot. That was a lot to hear. And it's also pretty rare for the police to release this many details about this level of brutality, especially when the victim is as young as Kimberly was. But her parents actually fought for these autopsy results to be made public, in full. They wanted the full, uncensored version of these details to be released and to be discussed. They wanted the world to know what happened to her, what she had been through, and they wanted everybody to understand that her life had been stolen by an absolute monster in every definition of the word. Even the police who were investigating Kimberly's murder were just speechless at how horrific all of this was.
There is no comparison. This is the facts in this case disturbed very deeply the most seasoned homicide investigators that we have in this province.
And of course, once the news broke that Kimberly had been killed in this brutal way, everybody was shocked, upset, and just utterly heartbroken. However, not everyone felt that way. In fact, there were a few people from her school whose response to the news was not quite what you would expect. See, Kimberly had been good friends with this girl named Samantha Kennedy. Samantha went to the same school as her. And when she heard about what happened to Kimberly, she was like wrecked, devastated. But then one day she was at school with a 16-year-old guy named Cruz Wellwood, to be exact. And Cruz had been one of the friends that Kimberly met through her ex-boyfriend, Zach. But when Zach and Kimberly had broken up, Cruz had actually ended up staying closer friends to Kimberly than Zach. Apparently, he supported her through the breakup and even tried to help her get over Zach. Well, now that Kimberly was dead, Cruz and Samantha had a very different reaction to the situation. Samantha found it too painful to even think about Kimberly, to even talk about her. Of course, she wanted her friend's memory to live on, but she also knew that she needed some time to grieve on her own schedule before she could just be an advocate for Kimberly or super outspoken. Yet Cruz, on the other hand, he would not shut up about her. It was like every conversation that he had with anyone, he would find a way to bring it back to Kimberly and her murder. So one day, Samantha went up to Cruz and just kind of politely asked him to find some other topic to talk about. Like, whenever I'm around, please just do not talk about Kimberly. I can't listen to it anymore. It's just devastating. I don't want to hear it. Which sounds like a pretty reasonable request, right? Except when Samantha said this to Cruz, he flew into a complete rage. He just blew up at her and he screamed, "No one fucking cares. She's dead. Who even gives a shit?" Which, okay, everybody mourns differently. I get that. It's possible that Cruz only reacted this way because he was so upset. Except later, another friend overheard Cruz, and this time he said, "I'm glad she's dead. I hated her." Which, that doesn't feel like a good friend who's trying to help you get over your ex-boyfriend and be by your side and take your side in the breakup. And then when you're brutally murdered and, objectified and all these horrible things, to be like, "I'm glad she's dead. I hated her." Like, I'm sorry. How does that compute? It's a pretty heartless way to talk about a classmate's assault and murder. I mean, for sure, but no less a friend. Now, even though it's unsettling, this of course wasn't proof that he had anything to do with her murder. However, it was enough for the police to start taking a closer look at Cruz. Now, by this time, they had already reviewed all of the public Facebook posts, the social media accounts, everything people were commenting and posting. So apparently, they had actually already been keeping a pretty close eye on Cruz, watching his comings and goings, keeping tabs on who he talked to, where he went, everything. And get this, right around the time of Kimberly's disappearance, Cruz had actually assaulted his own mother. His own mother, for real. He got arrested for the attack and then made bail, but once he was out on bail, he actually had the audacity to go to Kimberly's memorial service. Like, he wanted to pay his respects, even though he had already been talking about how much he hated her and how nobody gave a shit and how he's so glad she's dead and all those other horrible things that he had been saying. Then, apparently, as he was leaving her memorial, he was literally skipping back to his car. Like he was some sort of fairy tale character, just like frolicking in a field or something. Like literally skipping. So then the detectives decided they were going to get a warrant for all of Cruz's digital records. They needed to see his cell phone records, his DMs, everything that was not posted or available to the public. And when the police looked at all of this information, they realized that Cruz had been following Kimberly's murder very closely, extremely closely, as in reading all the news articles he possibly could consume about it. And he also was texting one person in particular every single time that there was a development. And that other person was 17-year-old Cameron Moffett, who went by Cam for short. Like Cruz, Cam had been in Zach's social circle, and he had met Kimberly while the two of them were dating. He also stayed close to Kimberly after the breakup. In fact, Cam actually had a really big crush on Kimberly. And once it was clear to him that she and Zach were over and she was single, he asked her out. He wanted to be with her. And he sent her a text message that might sound a little familiar. It said, "There aren't many beautiful things I've seen, but I must say, you are one of them." Fairly sweet as far as, high school flirting and bad spelling goes. But it didn't take long for this friendly, flirty text to just turn into a very messy, complicated, drama-filled love triangle. Because like I mentioned before, Kimberly didn't get over Zach right away. And at the time when Cam was asking her out, she was still completely hung up on her ex. So instead of moving on and being with Cam for real or being with anybody else for real, she was now looking for ways to make her ex jealous. And she was also thinking that on some level, if she could either find somebody new or make him jealous enough, maybe it would help her get over Zach quicker, something like that. Again, young, you don't really think fully rationally. But basically, she was willing to date somebody that she didn't even like in the hopes that it would help her deal with her feelings. And specifically, she had her eye on Cruz, Zach and Cam's friend, not Cam, who professed his feelings to her. And I don't think that she actually liked Cruz in that way, but she knew that he was close to Zach and also a lot like him. So in her mind, it kind of made it worth chasing him a little bit. All of her friends, though, told her it was a really bad idea. She needed to just let it go and move on. But she ignored them and kept pursuing Zach and Cruz, both of them. Then, when Cam came around asking her out, rather than accepting a date with him or letting him down nicely, she basically tried to keep her options open with him, give like this non-answer roundabout answer. So after he sent her that text saying she was beautiful, she replied with a, "Aw, thanks," and a smiley face. So not an outright no or yes, but flirty enough, a little smiley face, kind of something to like keep the door open, right? Basically acting just interested enough to keep Cam chasing her, while not actually committing to him one way or another. And I'm just gonna say, I don't love the fact that Kimberly was trying to like play these guys against one another. It wasn't the kindest way to handle things, but at the same time, which I want to be very clear about this, it's not about placing blame on her. She was young. She was still figuring things out, relationships, emotions, how to navigate all the messy parts of love and heartbreak, like so many teens do. Hell, I did some weird shit like this even in my early 20s. And I don't think I ever need to say this either, but whatever choices she made, however impulsive or immature they might have been, those choices never justified what was about to happen to her. Because with Cam and Cruz, the real danger wasn't the drama or the love triangle. It was something way more disturbing. Now, while Cam might have just seemed like a heartbroken teen, him and Cruz were hiding a much darker obsession, a truly crazy obsession with violence, with murder, with gore, with all of it. And it turns out that Cruz was the son of a convicted murderer himself. Back in 2001, when Cruz was just 7 years old, his father had attacked a 16-year-old girl. He not only attacked her in a horrible sexual way, but he then murdered her. He got caught, charged, convicted, and then later sentenced to life in prison. And I don't want to make it sound like everyone is destined to make the same mistakes as their parents, cough, cough, Lily Peters' cousin, or that children of murderers always grow up to be murderers themselves, but we certainly have seen it. We absolutely have seen it. And in Cruz's case, specifically, he had a bit of an unhealthy way of dealing with everything that had happened with his dad. Because he started getting into trouble, getting arrested for different crimes. I mean, nothing serious or violent, but it was concerning that he was really young when he started doing all of these things. Before he even turned 16, he had already been caught smoking weed, stealing paychecks, stealing other money out of people's mailboxes, like full mail fraud. I mean, a lot of stuff. Later on, he then started setting fires, destroying people's property. I mean, you name it. And fires and animal torture or animal murder, those are, in my opinion, and from a lot of the cases we've talked about, like precursors to what's to come. Like, ooh, that's a red flag. It's probably going to escalate into something a little bit scarier. And that's what he was doing. He was setting fires, and he wasn't abusing animals, actually, but, well, that we know of. But still, one of the red flags there. And like I mentioned before, he was escalating because he assaulted his mother. And the more concerning thing was that Cruz seemed just weirdly obsessed with murder. He wrote a lot of blog posts about serial killers, and in these posts, he even joked that he thought that he might be a serial killer as well. Which, on its own, you might kind of shrug that off as Cruz being your typical edgy teenager trying to seem cool or dark or mysterious and rebellious. But blogging about killing people when you're the son of a murderer and also you're someone who's very clearly troubled and getting into legal problems, recipe for disaster, right? Now, as for Cam, he was technically at Pacific Secondary School because of his ADHD, just like Kimberly. But unofficially, he was clearly dealing with some very serious emotional issues. He was a survivor of an assault of sexual nature, which horrifyingly happened to him when he was only 4 years old. I mean, basically still a freaking baby. And after that attack, he just couldn't cope or didn't know how to cope, and he started self-harming and using razors and other sharp instruments to do that. He also repeatedly jumped out of his bedroom window, which I don't know if that was a full-on solid attempt to take his own life, or if maybe it was more like he didn't feel safe in his room and that was a way to get out. It's a little unclear, but I do know that his parents eventually had to put bars up on his windows to stop him from getting out, which probably didn't do much to make him feel any more safe or secure if he was trying to escape. Now, the identity of Cam's attacker from when he was 4 years old has not been made public, but I do think that it's safe to say that by the time that Cam was a teenager, he was pretty much angry at the entire world. Not only the world, but the person who had hurt him and all of the adults who had failed to protect him, so everyone. So with all of that, he too had a bad habit of lashing out and threatening other people. He even got in trouble for bringing a knife to school at one point. But then, like we've seen in unfortunately a lot of different friendships, especially young friendships, Cam met Cruz and it was like they just clicked, they connected. He felt seen for the first time. He had finally met someone who could understand all this rage and all this darkness that was brewing inside of him. And this was someone who not only didn't judge him for it, but could relate to him about it. So from that point on, Cruz and Cam were basically best friends. And they really egged each other on to embrace these darker and unsettling hobbies. More specifically, they just constantly talked murder with one another. Now, these were all the things that the police knew about Cruz and Cam without even looking at their digital data. This was all public information, or stuff that they had posted online, or rumors that the police had learned about during the investigation through talking with Cam and Cruz's friends. This was just the public information. Once they went and pulled the digital records and everything from their computers and their phones, I mean, strap in, because this is where things get really crazy. Now, remember earlier how I said that Cruz and Cam were really into violence and murder? Well, as it turns out, They both also really enjoyed looking at BDSM adult material. The two of them would even watch this together sometimes. They also texted each other all the time about bondage, torture, and it was pretty clear that Cruz and Cam liked these videos that they had watched and wanted to bring them to life and like reenact it for real. It was almost like watching this content on the online or wherever they were finding it wasn't enough anymore. It wasn't quenching their thirst. They had an appetite for it. They wanted to bring it to life. So then they started exchanging messages with each other about how they wanted to kidnap a woman, how they wanted to tie her up, assault her, and murder her. Basically, exactly what happened to Kimberly. And sadly, she wasn't the first person who they acted out these fantasies with. Cam allegedly was violent against 5 different girls that he had dated. The allegations state that while he was having consensual sex, he ended up tying 4 of them up and was generally rough with them. He also apparently used verbally abusive language while in bed with them. Then the 5th accuser said that the sex was not consensual, that he forced himself on her. Another accuser, on top of the already 5, said that Cruz had once assaulted her too, and that he did it more than once. Which, let's just say, it was probably a good thing that Kimberly didn't agree to go on a date with Cam when he first asked her out. But also, like I mentioned before, she didn't really reject him. She sort of kept her options open. Then one day, and I apologize in advance because it's kind of gross, Cam sent Kimberly a text. In it, he told her that he wanted to give her a cream-filled lollipop that he kept in his pants. First of all, who the heck talks like that, okay? Where'd he even hear that term? I've heard some disgusting stuff like cream pie and like weird shit. Cream-filled lollipop, honestly, it's so disgusting. And the fact that a high school kid was saying this, it honestly is making me gag. I've been sitting with this information for a while after researching it. It still is making me gag. Like, who says this? Who says that kind of stuff? Now, because Kimberly was sort of playing the guys against one another, she right away texted Cruz and told him what Cam had said, which Cruz wrote back and said, you know, I happen to own that brand of lollipop as well. Like, get a grip. This is crazy. Now, besides the fact that this was a really gross thing for these kids to be texting each other, I also cannot read those chats without thinking about the fact that when Kimberly got her autopsy, the coroner said that she had been sexually assaulted in a sexual way with a lollipop stick. Remember, a 4-inch lollipop stick. So in a way, when Cam and Cruz were sending her these text messages about wanting to give her a cream-filled lollipop, they weren't just flirting in a really immature, sexually graphic and gross way. It was almost like they were telling Kimberly exactly what they were planning to do to her when they murdered her. I mean, it was sick. In fact, one day before the murder, Cruz texted Kimberly again, and I haven't been able to verify this, but I have heard rumors that he was replying to Kimberly after she told him that she was sad about the fact that her rabbit had died. But in any event, I don't know if that's true, but this text does include some references to a dead rabbit, so the rumors kind of do make sense to me. But let me read the thread to you. And you know what, actually, I'm not going to read it to you because it's a kind of a long thread, and I'm worried that even if I say who's talking, it's like you won't get the full context if you don't hear a male and a female voice. So I'm actually going to use AI right here and have those voices read these text messages to each other.
Oh, what do you want?
What are you doing tomorrow?
Nothing other than babysitting at 3.
I'm bored and was looking for someone to chill with today. I also wanted to apologize.
Oh?
I have some things I'd rather tell you in person about the entire Zach fiasco.
This is sudden, and I can't help but wonder why. I don't want to talk about Zach.
Zach and I aren't as close as we used to be, but I feel you deserve an explanation.
Don't worry, it's not much.
It's more about why Cam and me and everyone was so mean.
Whatever happened to Kim, you deserve nothing, I kill your rabbit. Haha.
That's what I wanted to talk about.
I gotta say, when I saw her text, I was shocked and confused.
But like I said, I'd rather talk in person. I can meet you tomorrow earlier than babysitting and talk about it over a couple bowls.
Sure.
So clearly Cruz was saying whatever he could to get Kimberly to agree to meet him in person. And he was also dangling this promise that he was going to explain why Zach had broken up with her and give her some kind of clarity about everything that had happened with the breakup between the two of them. And it was hard for Kimberly to resist this, even though she definitely was seeing the red flags. Because at the exact same time that Cruz was texting her and trying to get her to come over We also know that Cam sent her a text message, which, get this, he sent her a text that read, "You're going to die next." To which she responded, ... like, what? What are you talking about? I mean, looking back, it's eerie, right? Because this guy literally told Kimberly that he was going to kill her. And she replied with 3 dots, because obviously I don't think she took this threat seriously. I don't think she had any idea that Cam and Cruz really wanted to hurt her. She also certainly didn't see the instant messages that they were sending each other. But in those IMs to one another, they were saying things like this.
Cameron Moffat, I guess we plan for it, but we keep our eyes open. Cruz Wellwood. This is so funny. Jam a funnel in her and fill it with water. When you're done, pour Drano in her. I am going to rip her nose ring out and burn it. Burn her flesh. Moffat, I want to get it done. I don't want to wait. I'm not killing her right away, says Wellwood. Moffat asks, you're not going to keep her bound and alive? That's what I'm going to do, Wellwood replies, but I need to get her stoned first and possibly seduce her. Try quickly, Moffat laughs. I wonder if she has money and stuff, he says. I'm going to take stuff. Damn. Well, I'll take whatever she has.
I mean, truly so unbalanced and disturbed, right? I don't even know a word that is strong enough for this. Disturbed. Who talks about things like that? Who fantasizes about things like that? It is evil. Pure evil. So after all this weird back and forth and all of these text messages, Kimberly does agree to meet up with both Cam and Cruz. They agreed to hang out on March 18th, 2010, the same day that Kimberly went missing. And it was supposed to be a quick meetup before she then headed off and went to her babysitting job that afternoon. But as we know, she never made it to the babysitting job. So on that day, Cam and Cruz met Kimberly at a bus station in town at around 10:30 a.m. From there, they all walked over to Cruz's house, where he lived with his mom. She wasn't there, and I'm guessing she might have been at work or maybe even running errands, but wherever she was, the boys knew that she was not going to be back for a while, and they had hours to put their plan into action. And the plan was for them to hang out with Kimberly and talk to her until she let her guard down. Then, whenever Cruz thought that it was the right moment, that everything was aligned, he was supposed to say a code phrase. He was going to say, quote, "I'm gonna make some KD." Now, KD is apparently Canadian slang for Kraft dinner. It's what they call mac and cheese. Never heard of it, but found that in my research. So the idea was that Cruz would say that he wanted to go make KD, and then that would be the signal for Cam to attack Kimberly, which is exactly what they did. I don't know why they went through the effort of coming up with a code phrase before the attack, though, because it couldn't have bought them more than, a few seconds. But for whatever reason, maybe that was just like they thought that it was exciting to have a code word or something like that. So for whatever reason, Cruz said the phrase, and then he and Cam jumped Kimberly. First, they beat her while they were tying her up, trying to stop her from getting away. In the meantime, they stuffed that sock into her mouth and duct taped her mouth closed. Then, for hours, once she was bound and unable to run away or fight back, they took turns assaulting her. And the attack did not stop, which I know I touched on the details before, but I think it is worth repeating here. They cut her. They stuck feces in her. They stuck a lollipop stick inside of her. They stuck a sock and duct tape over her mouth. I mean, again, what is another word for evil? Let's ask. Hold on. Siri, what's another word for evil? Wicked. That's good. Unholy, foul, sinister, wicked. That is what perfect to describe this case. Now, my assumption is that the plan was always to kill her, and I'm basing that on the text messages that Cam had sent her in advance, when he said, "You're gonna die next." But I don't know if they actually realized that she would suffocate to death after they stuck her in the freezer. I almost feel like they hoped that she would live longer so that they could keep brutalizing her and keep treating her horribly. Like, put her in the freezer, we'll come back to her later, let's take a break, something like that. I don't know what their plan was. I'm just guessing. And the reason I'm saying that is because, remember, they continued their attack even post-mortem. So what I know is that they put her in that freezer, and then finally Kimberly suffocated and she died. They then assaulted her post-mortem because they still weren't done. And afterward, Cruz and Cam continued to text one another about that night, almost reliving it.
Cameron Moffat sends a message to Cruz Wellwood saying, "A friend sent me that, pretty sick." Wellwood responds, "Already saw this, all on the news." And then, as if a warning, Moffat replies, My dad said, if they ask me questions at school, not to answer them and ask for a parent. So since we killed that bitch, he says, and it wasn't too hard, we should do it again.
As if all of that wasn't horrific enough, these next details are just sick. During the time when Cam and Cruz were attacking Kimberly, basically torturing her to death and then shoving her remains in that freezer, one of Cruz's friends was messaging him on IM, Instant Messenger. Nothing important or urgent, the friend just wanted to, message him and text. But then when Cruz didn't reply right away, this friend started getting impatient and kept sending follow-up messages like, hey, what's up? Are you ignoring me? Where are you? ? Well, once Cruz got back to his computer and saw these messages, he replied with a really sick joke. He said, sorry, the freezer was jumping around. Which of course doesn't make any sense on its own, and I can't imagine what the friend thought of that either. But clearly, Cruz was hinting in a nonchalant way what he was really up to. Sort of like a wink, wink, nudge, nudge, like there's a body in my freezer, it's jumping around, that kind of thing. That night, Cam also sent a message to one other person, an ex-girlfriend of his. He asked her to come over to Cruz's house and hang out, but fortunately for her, she didn't reply. And obviously, I don't know exactly what his intentions were when he sent that text, but I could take an educated guess. Maybe they weren't done with their thrill and with what they were doing, so they wanted to bring somebody else in since Kimberly had died. I mean, I can imagine that Cam and Cruz were feeling revved up and excited from this murder that they had just committed. They were making jokes over it, inviting people over. I mean, clearly they weren't remorseful. So I don't think it'd be too far off to speculate that Cam might have been hoping to kill his ex as well and get a second body in that freezer. I could be wrong, obviously, but I'm just so glad that his ex ignored his invitation and did not come over. So then the next morning came, and it was time to dispose of Kimberly. And these two boys shoved Kimberly's body into a large, big hockey bag, then took a bus to a remote area outside of town, and then went to the Galloping Goose Bridge. There, they set everything, the bag, the body, everything, just ablaze, right on fire. And while they were at the bridge, destroying the evidence, Cruz was just texting people. Nothing urgent or anything related to the murder, just checking in with people. It was all very casual, almost like he didn't care at all about the insanity and the sickness of what he was doing. It was just another day for him. It was also pretty clear that he didn't even consider the fact that anybody might be checking his phone location while he was texting, because he was messaging just a few steps away from Kimberly's body. So it really came across like he and Cam thought that they were getting away with something. The burning of her body, the braggy text messages, I mean, Cam and Cruz really were acting like they were not even remotely worried at all that the police were going to eventually track them down. They thought that they had it all figured out. But as we know, and we love to see it, the data doesn't lie, the evidence doesn't lie, and it was so obvious to the police that Cam and Cruz, they were the killers in this case. Especially because of the last piece of evidence, which I haven't covered yet. But it really does drive home just what kinds of people Cam and Cruz were. I mean, in terms of how they were feeling after the murder, and I guess just in terms of their personalities in general. As if you don't already have a sense of that already, right? But see, Cruz actually had a girlfriend. And I'm sure she had no idea that he was playing these weird head games with Kimberly, or that he was part of this love triangle, or, assaulting and murdering his classmates. But she did figure it out pretty quickly, because Cruz and his girlfriend really liked playing World of Warcraft together. And if you spent any time online in the 2000s or early 2010s, you're probably familiar with the game. But if you don't know, it's like this multiplayer online game where you pretend to be a mythical creature and then you fight, you go on quests, things like that. And like Warzone, which is so popular now, World of Warcraft also has this in-game chat function so that players can talk to one another, not just typing or chat room stuff, but actually wear a headset and interact together. So it felt more private to him. Like there was no risk of somebody seeing a notification on his phone or hacking his Facebook. He was talking to his girlfriend. And I'll be honest, I don't know enough about technology to say one way or another if this game was more secure than other methods of talking, but Cruz definitely thought that it was. And on March 23rd, 2010, Cruz was really itching to tell somebody about what he had done to Kimberly. And I don't mean that he needed to relieve his guilty conscience or get it off his chest, nothing like that. No, he wanted to brag. He wanted bragging rights. So Cruz logged on to World of Warcraft, and he told his girlfriend everything. He told her what he had done, how he did it, how he had covered his tracks. He also sent her a bunch of links to different news articles about Kimberly's disappearance and murder. And this next part is absolutely shocking, truly it is. But the girlfriend's reply was, "I'll always be here, no matter what you do." Okay. Now, I don't know the girlfriend's identity. I don't know if maybe she didn't really believe him and that's why she said this and she thought he was just pretending, but it still is unsettling to me. And it's kind of a red flag in its own right, if I'm being honest. And ultimately, the girlfriend didn't need to turn Cruz in. I mean, the police had all of the information on their own. They pulled all of his digital records. They had evidence. So while she should have certainly called, they definitely didn't need her. So they arrested Cruz and Cam on June 18th, 2010, 4 months to the day after Kimberly's horrible abduction, her attack, and her murder. And each of them was charged with first-degree murder and also charged with indignity to human remains. They were also interrogated, and Cam's interrogation footage, it's chilling.
So when that's happening, what's going through your head?
Everything, a million miles an hour. The adrenaline where it's like, oh my freaking god, and like puke your guts out. And
fight or flight. Have you ever experienced that before?
Yeah.
So this is probably the biggest event of fight or flight in your whole life?
Probably. He's, strutting around the house, like yelling to himself. It's like,
Kinds of things.
This just happened, what happens if I don't listen? You can only draw the line so far with disturbing, horrendous, gruesome,
horrific,
completely disgusting, horrifying.
Telling you the truth, I'm just not telling you every single little thing that happened down to the tiniest grain of detail that can come up into my mind.
Mm-hmm.
And trust me, there's a lot of really disgusting...
Okay, let's take a step back. What is that fire trying to hide?
All sorts of stuff.
It'll also be lit to destroy evidence, right?
We destroy evidence. Like, the only thing you can't destroy is damage, like the bones and stuff.
Yeah, you can't destroy that.
But you can't see bruises, all sorts of stuff on it.
Ask you the question, is it here up or here down? You're saying that item number 1
is there down.
Is there down. Item number 2?
Now, when it comes to getting a guilty conviction, the police had basically everything that they needed. They had a confession right there on tape. They also had all of the digital evidence. All that they were now missing was a motive. I mean, what could ever drive someone to kill their friend in such a brutal, sadistic way? Well, the best theory that the prosecutors could come up with was that Cam and Cruz just did it for the thrill of it. As for why they picked Kimberly to be their victim, the sad thing is, she was just unlucky. Before they killed her, Cam and Cruz actually even made a list of possible victims, other teens that they knew who they thought that they could get away with murdering. And Kimberly wasn't even their top choice. They had reached out to 2 other people on the day of the homicide, but both of those 2 people were busy. They said they had other plans. They weren't able to meet up. So when you think about that, Kimberly died simply because she was the one who said yes to hanging out, the one who thought that it might be fun to hang out with her friends who, by the way, she trusted. That's the only reason that she brutally lost her life that day. The good news was that at least she would get justice. Instead of going to trial and dragging everything out, both Cam and Cruz agreed to plead guilty. They actually talked about it with one another before they even got to court, and let's just say, in this conversation, they do not sound regretful or remorseful. They're still bragging, even when they are on their way to literally plead guilty to murder.
Oh, this sucks.
Really, they just made it seem like I got screwed over, and they're like, we understand. I'm like, you touched me.
The entire time, I had this expression.
I just laughed at like half the things they said, and just like sat there with a big ass grin on my face.
They're like, remorse. Do you feel any remorse? Any regrets? Anything inside of you? Any remorse? Regrets? Any remorse? Any remorse? Remorse? Did you feel remorse?
But despite their circumstances, Cameron Moffat and Cruz Wellwood showed no emotion as they were led shackled into the overflowing courtroom and seated directly in front of Proctor's parents. They simply stared straight ahead as the judge read his decision. You chose her because you thought she was an easy target, Justice Robert Johnston told them. The circumstances of these offenses are so horrific that no words can convey the inhumane cruelty showed to Miss Proctor. He then handed the killers the toughest sentence possible, an adult term of life in prison with no chance of parole for at least 10 years. Outside court, pain and anger was still clearly raw for Proctor's family, undiminished by today's ruling.
These animals aren't rehabilitatable. They deserve to die a long, slow, horrific, painful death.
I don't even like to call them animals because Kim was just such an animal lover. To me, they're just monsters.
Kim was just a very kind, caring person. I mean, kind to a fault. I mean, she was
a
preyed
peacemaker.
upon. You know, they used her good nature and good heart, and probably is what lured her to them, you know.
Now, I do want to talk a little bit about the sentence because it's crazy to me that the commentary on that clip that we just watched said that it was a super harsh sentence, because in my mind, having a shot at being paroled after 10 years for murder and for what they did to her, that's not harsh, not at all, especially for how brutal and horrific it was. But you also have to remember that Cruz and Cam were both minors when they committed the murder. Cruz was 16 and Cam was 17. And if they had been tried as minors, the maximum penalty that they could have gotten in Canada would have been, get this, 6 years, followed then by 4 years of supervised parole. 6 years? Really? So, in a very technical sense, the fact that Cruz and Cam got tried as adults and could have been in prison for the rest of their lives is much harsher than it could have been if they were tried as minors. Still, most adults who are convicted of murder in Canada aren't eligible for parole until 25 years. So, in my opinion, they still did get off a little bit easy. And let's also talk about that math really quick, because the sentence came down in 2010. And 10 years after that was 2020. We are in 2025 now. So 2020 was when they were first eligible for release. Now, Cruz and Cam didn't have an easy time trying to get parole. I mean, first, because it's pretty tough for anyone who was involved in this brutal murder of this young girl and such a violent crime to then, somehow convince the board that they deserve to be free. But also because their first parole hearing was at the height of COVID, when all that chaos was brought into the legal system and everything was delayed. And also because during their time in prison, both Cruz and Cam had to go get mental health counseling and go through, very specific programs that were designed for offenders. Both of them in that process and program were diagnosed with psychopathy, sexual deviance, and conduct disorders, basically saying that there were factors that made them act the way that they did when they murdered Kimberly. And I always find that so interesting because in other cases, like Skylar Neese comes to mind, the Slender Man killing comes to mind, where two friends gang up on another, I always find it fascinating, like, how do they find each other? And what's that, what is that saying, the French one? Folie à deux? I don't think I'm saying it right. Folie à deux? Something like that. Where it's like, how do two people in this whole world cross paths and they're both psychotic enough to link up and then do the unthinkable? It never ceases to amaze me. And it kind of makes me worried that there's more people out there like that than we think. But anyway. So in their parole hearing, Cruz and Cam now didn't just have to convince the courts that they felt remorse and that they wanted reform. They also needed to show that they had mentally and emotionally healed, that they had overcome their mental health conditions, and that they would resist the temptation to commit a new crime again, which was basically impossible for them to prove because all of their doctors and psychologists and everybody else came forward saying, no. Cam and Cruz, they are dangerous people. They are a real threat to society. Their argument was that Cam and Cruz couldn't be safely released without at least 40 years of very intensive therapy. They just didn't know how to control their impulses or manage their tempers. Cruz, in particular, would throw these massive tantrums in his cell whenever he didn't get his way. He would cry, he would punch, he'd kick the walls, the doors, he'd yank out his own hair. Acting completely out of control. The therapist also said that while he was behind bars, Cruz began bragging about the murder to anybody who would listen. In some cases, he even talked about what he had done to Kimberly in graphic detail. So much so that the inmates that he was talking to in the prison had to go seek counseling because of how disturbing it was. So Cruz and Cam's request for parole was denied in 2020. That's in spite of the fact that Cruz actually tried to argue that after 10 years in prison, he was now super religious, saying the courts should let him out so that he could go to church every Sunday, which, hello, the argument didn't fly. It took the group 10 minutes to deliberate and come back with a, no, not gonna happen. They then both filed again for parole in 2024. Once again, Cruz had a pretty crazy argument for why he should be let go. He said that actually Cam was the one who came up with the entire idea to even, murder Kimberly, that Cam had been the ringleader, which interestingly enough was the exact opposite of what Cam had said in that interrogation with the police, where he said Cruz was the one that came up with this whole plan. So who knows who was really telling the truth, but the point was Cruz basically went to court and said he wouldn't have even committed this murder if not for Cam. And he certainly wasn't going to do it again, so because of that, he should be set free. But it was still a no-go. Never going to happen. The parole committee actually said that they didn't even care whose idea it was or who was doing most of the work during the murder. The idea that Cruz could have even been a bystander, just watching Kimberly die in such a horrific way and not try to help her, that was still disgusting in its own right. It's like just because you weren't the ringleader doesn't mean your behavior is excused. Now, while he was going through the parole process in November of 2024, Cam did get permission for a 4-hour temporary absence. The gist was that Cam wanted to transfer to a different prison, a lower security one, and the courts gave him permission to leave the prison that he was currently at long enough to go tour the different prison with guards keeping a very close eye on him, which I've never really thought about that. I've never heard that you can request to be transferred and they let you go tour prisons. I mean, if that were the case, wouldn't everybody request transfers not only to have lower security, but also to get out of prison and have a field trip? I would. 100% I would. Which we'll see what pans out with that. But the two of them are still in prison, and they will stay there for the foreseeable future. Interestingly, even though Cruz and Cam's psychiatrists say that they're not safe to be out there in the free world with the general public, they also do say they shouldn't be kept in prison either. Apparently, their psychological problems are so severe that the mental health experts say that these two murderers can't ever get the treatment that they need while they are in prison, that they need to be in a hospital if they ever want to get better. Now, the angering and sad thing about all of this is that each time Cruz and Cam file a new appeal, Kimberly's parents have to go to court. They have to reopen their old wounds. They don't want to see these two people ever again, and they don't ever want to see them be free again, but they also have to go and fight to keep having justice for Kimberly, which is so incredibly painful. I can't imagine having to do that time after time because the audacity of these two dipshits keep putting you through this. Let the family heal. It's just insane.
No matter how much time has passed.
Oh, sorry. It's still devastating.
Emotions are raw.
Never forget that day. It was a horrible day.
Yeah.
Words cannot describe how horrible it is.
It's a life sentence, right? For us.
Proctor's family traveling from the island to Mountain Institution for Moffat's parole hearing.
First-degree rape and murder, we shouldn't be having to come to parole hearings 14 years later. A person should stay in jail and rot forever. Life should mean life. You have to show up to show that we're appalled at the whole thing and that there's no way you should be allowed out.
They have no right to be protected. The general public has the right to know who these two monsters are.
We live every day, day to day right now. We don't plan anything. There's so many signs, the weather, the daffodils coming up. Every day we walk past, down the hallways, upstairs and downstairs, past all of our kids' pictures that from the time they were babies right up to the time a year ago. There's constant reminders every day. It's just, I don't know I can't say how we can move forward at this point.
Kimberly was only 18 years old when her life was snuffed out by people who she trusted, her friends, and they manipulated her, they twisted things, and they literally preyed on her because they wanted to just act out their own deviant sexual fantasies. she was innocent in all of this. She was a daughter, a friend, a student. She was right about to graduate, and they just used her as a toy, as something to just enact their salacious, disgusting perversions. She deserved so much more, and like her family fought for the autopsy to be public and for people to know what these monsters did to her, that's the best way we can honor Kimberly. Make sure that her voice is never forgotten, that her legacy and her story continues on, because these guys should never see the light of day. And hospital, prison, wherever it is, just lock them up. Keep them locked up. Get rid of them. If you feel like if there's professionals saying there's not even a shot of reform, great. Get them out of here. Like, let's cut ties with them, right? Like, why continue to feed them and house them? And sorry, I know that's like a hot take, but like, come on. Come on, look at what these barbaric animals did. It's disgusting. I really appreciate you guys listening to Kimberly's story today. I know this one was a difficult one to hear, so thank you. That's all we have for today. I will be back with you next week with another deep dive into another case. So if you're not subscribed to the channel already, make sure you take a quick second, do so below by clicking subscribe, and I'll be talking to you again very soon. Until the next case, stay safe.